with the two hands. So I pray and wish that by the end of the day, we should be able to agree as economists that circumstances are not always the same way, and therefore we need some bit of intervention, and therefore we need to come up with resolutions out of this meeting that are concrete other than resolutions that are contradictory. I've been asked to talk about a case of value addition and industrialization as UDC. That is our work. That's where we play a key role. And I will explain this a little more and how we come in. I will build on the protocol that had earlier on been communicated by the Master of Ceremonies. So I will start by contributing to that understanding. Spend a few minutes because Dr. Muhumuza has really done justice to this topic. But what I wanted to bring out clearly is that what is the end game of the whole ideology and the strategy around Musevenomics? Some of those people who are senior to us here know more about the 10-point program. And by that time, of those 10 points, point number 5 emphasized having an integrated, independent, and self-sustaining economy. Throughout my discussion, you will see that the aim, the ultimate aim, is having that integrated, independent, and self-sustaining economy. So on this slide, you'll see the far end. I guess it's to your right, the far end to my left. The impact of Musevenomics is about having that integrated, independent, and self-sustaining economy. We've looked through a series of speeches by His Excellency the President over the years and tried to look at what are those key pillars in his communication. And the key pillars or key fundamentals are the ones that begin on my right, on your left. It's about awakening the sleeping peasants so that they can join the money economy. We'll have a whole session tomorrow to discuss that. It's about fostering value addition. This is the session on that. It's about low cost of doing business. I think there is a section to that this afternoon. Land consolidation and tenure security. Because of the 2 days, I guess we could not have detailed discussion on all of them. But we'll have a discussion on economics and political integration tomorrow as well. But there are many other key foundations: private sector led development, security of persons and property, and so on and so forth. And you remember a time when all of us would run to the TVs during COVID because the president is going to address the nation. And at that time, one of the key papers that came out was the paper on the real economy versus vulnerable economy. I'm sure you remember that, because at that time everyone listened to TV. And then we waited for that key phrase or key word, therefore. And at that time, the president wrote this paper to say that if your economy is heavily dependent on the vulnerable sectors, then that economy will get a shock anytime and it will go down. And he emphasized the need to have a key fundamentals of the real economy. And he emphasized production and productivity, industry and value addition. He emphasized value addition, and he says we are going to transform Uganda's raw materials, whether agriculture, minerals, or others, into high quality products or goods to unlock their full economic potential. So today, you will hear about those key policy decisions. There is no exportation of ore. You will hear of those key decisions that we must add value to coffee. And in all his speeches, he emphasized some of these tenets. He talked about building a robust manufacturing sector. During those days when we used to listen to these speeches, you remember when he used to say, we shall produce those medicines here. We shall produce those gloves here. We shall produce, and so on and so forth. So I will briefly talk about the historical context and foundations of the industrialization journey in Uganda. It doesn't mean that industrialization began with the coming in of our colonial masters at the time. Maybe the modern definition of industrialization could have. But in 1903, a company was registered here called the Uganda Company, a fully British-owned company. That company ended up introducing us to a different form of industrialization, where we got a ginning facility in Soroti, tea processing in Metiana, and so on and so forth. It was the beginning of a different era of industrialization. It doesn't mean we're not mining ore to produce hose. We had our own kind of hose, but to produce them massively, to produce them on an industrial scale, was something that was introduced in this country by the British governments. At that time, there was the introduction of the 3 C's and the 3 T's. The coffee, cotton, and copper, the tea, tobacco, and tourism at that time. And these were introduced as cash crops, cash commodities, where we got money from. We exported them with minimum value addition or no value addition at all. So the best we could do in industrialization at the time is packaging industrialization. So you get the cotton seed, remove the seeds, and package it or bale it and export. Today, we are still doing a lot of that. But if you look at the old national development plans in the 1960s, you'll still find that those development plans were talking about manufacturing and agro-value addition. So the big change or game changer happens in 1952 when two key institutions were established in this country, and that is the Uganda Electricity Board and the Uganda Development Corporation. So this was a game changer. The game changer was now a move towards encouraging industrialization. UEB was brought in place to make sure that we have power generation, distribution, and management. UDC, on the other hand, was brought in place to utilize that power, but also to propagate that industrialization agenda in the country. As a result of the introduction of UDC, with an investment of about £5 million at the time, we saw a lot of investments happening in this space. In the first 2 decades of its existence, UDC was at the center of development of this country. Dr. Muhumza talked about Coffee Marketing Board, but there was a bigger institution called UDC at that time. There are so many industries that were established. If you go in the agricultural space, the Uganda Grain Milling Company, the Agriculture Enterprises Limited, that led to the establishments of those tea factories in Kienjojo, Fort Potro, Kanungu, and so on. Tafmark, the livestock industries. I guess it's only the table where Professor Kamunti is seated that is following me at this moment. Because they lived this period, they know what this meant for the country. Whether it is in metals, the Steel Corporation of Uganda, Tampeco, and so on. Whether it is in minerals, the Klembe mines, Uganda Cement, which established Tororo and Hima cement factories, partly related to the goal of UEB at the time to try and provide cement for construction of the Owen Falls Dam. All these things this is where the game changer of industrialization actually took place. In chemicals, again, we had so many other chemical industries. In textiles, Nyaitil, for example, all these companies were started by UDC at the time in cooperation with the Commonwealth Development Corporation, CDC, of UK at that time. Today it's called BII, British International Investment, something like that. It was in the banking sector. If you talk about DFCU today, these financial institutions were established by UDC of that day. And the financial institutions, UGADEV, which transformed into UDB in 1972, were all started with the aim of financing the development goal of UDC at that time. And where UDC was also in the hospitality sector. I remember among the 3 T's there was tourism, and therefore there had to be tourism infrastructure across the whole country. And if you know what used to be called the Uganda hotels, in all these major towns, there was a Uganda hotel. Whether it is in Jinja, in Soroti, in Moroto Inn, in Acholi Inn, all over the country. So by that time, UDC was contributing about 33% of the country's total revenue through taxation. and was the second largest employer with an employment of employing about, with its subsidiaries, employing about 24,000 people, second only to public service. Public service had the army, the teachers, the health workers, and so on and so forth. So it was really the center of economic development. I'll leave the details to those people who were there at that time to tell us later on in the discussion. At independence in 1962, the structure was largely agrarian. 50% of GDP was agriculture. Manufacturing and electricity and so on was about 25%. Then trade, commerce was about 15%, and public administration about 11%. When we looked at the manufacturing snapshot at that time, we were more into cotton ginning, coffee, and so on and so forth. But we also had cotton, establishment of Nyanza textiles that I talked about, and later on the Kilembe mines and so on and so forth. The country was relatively stable from the macroeconomic point of view, but the population growth was still around 2.93% throughout at that time. We had very positive growth over those years. The 70s up to 86, we saw a collapse of most of our economy, emanating from the policy drive at the time, a move to the east. So we saw industrial bases collapsing. We saw a number of private sector-led institutions taken into government, thrown into UDC, expanding the base of UDC, making UDC a very amorphous organization. Coupled with the wars that followed, these institutions could not sustain their profitability and performance in the years that followed. So the liberalization that Professor Suruma talked about and Dr. Mahums also talked about found fertile ground, because these were institutions that were pulling resources from the treasury. So it found fertile ground for liberalization to take root and drive the agenda of the time. My colleagues have talked about the macroeconomic instability at that time, inflation beyond 200%, and later on I will tell you for the last 3 or 4, almost 4 decades, inflation has been contained to below 5%, save for the years of post-COVID and the impacts of that. So the concentration of the leadership at the time was more on restoring security and rule of law, return assets to the private sector. Remember, private sector-led was a key fundamental in this discussion, and revival of basic manufacturing activities. The Washington Consensus, when we went to liberalization and privatization, I guess Washington Consensus means these policies were enshrined in the World Bank, IMF thinking, and therefore direction to the developing countries. So we went to structure adjustment programs. Honorable Mao and I had some strikes at the university, particularly to resist some of the structure adjustment programs, especially when they touched our boom. Those who were there at the time know what boom means or meant to us. So we used to get those allowances for books, for whatever, and then under structure adjustment programs, say financing higher education, reduce the cost, and then try to finance more primary education. And that led to a bit of challenges. But yes, we did resist. We may not have achieved all the goals, but I think we did our best. So when it came to liberalization era, the question was, if you are told to liberalize, are you told to open the door so that you can allow the private sector to play a role? Or are you told to remove the door with its hinges? So I think this could have been the gap in our policy framework. So when we went to liberalization, we removed the door with its hinges instead of opening the door and allow a bit of interaction where government plays a role. We have seen after liberalization and privatization, most of the assets you hear were privatized were actually UDC companies. So the companies I talked about earlier, the Uganda hotels, the Nyait Hills, the whatever, were sold at that moment. So there was no need for UDC to continue existing. Whatever remained was managed under the PAD Act, and UDC was erased in 1998. Then efforts started to strategically reorient ourselves, because during this era, we went for programs like PEP, Poverty Eradication Action Plan, largely short-term plans, good at the time, but they never gave us a foundation for long-term thinking, for long-term investments. And therefore, over this period, we saw increasing focus around 2000, increasing focus on value addition, industrial policy, regional integration. The thinking started to come alive. Diversification of production and market-driven industrial base, these were kind of discussions on public-private partnerships started coming into play. But there was no framework in which government was interacting with the private sector anymore, because UDC had been abolished a few years back. These policies were not bad, but the opening of the door and the removing of the door with its hinges became the biggest gap. So there was need to liberalize, there was need to privatize, but with government intervention where the private sector fails. I will show you later on, I will tell you later on that markets fail. For us to think markets are going to clear all the time and think that the markets will give us the best outcomes all the time, sometimes it's not true. And that's why most of the fast-growing countries had their interventionist approach within their economics framework. Along this industrialization journey, we've seen sector contribution slightly changing. the service sector growing, especially with the introduction of the communications industry, MTN, Airtel, and so on and so forth. We've also seen the manufacturing sector growing over the years from about 23% in 2008 to about 27% last year. Though the manufacturing, specifically manufacturing, remained almost stable, in value terms it has increased because GDP is increasing. So this is in relation to GDP. In terms of what we produce over the years, we have not changed much from the 60s. We are still in food processing or agro-value addition. We are still doing textiles. We are still doing drinks and tobacco and so on and so forth. And then construction industry. We've seen manufacturing growing. On the next graph, in particular sectors. In construction, the construction industry have been growing. The chemical industry for soaps and whatever have been growing. Like colleagues who spoke before me earlier said, most of these basics were being imported. In fact, our neighbors, Kenya here, established industries in Kisumu, particularly to supply goods to Uganda, because of the state of our industrial base at the time. But this has greatly changed for some of the basic items that we need. So at the end of it all, we see textiles, drinks and tobacco, some improvement. On the next slide, you'll see what dominates our food and beverages sector. Those of you who take a nail special in the evening, you promote industrial development in this country. And those of you who take water and soda, you also do the same. So food processing in terms of grain milling has also been on the upward trend, growing at about 33%. That could be a reflection of our own increased consumer demand as a country, internal market. I'll talk about the external market later. On the next slide, we also see the textiles and garmenting industry going up. And these are the sectors currently which are big employers that would offtake a lot of our youth from the streets with the minimum skilling required. But the ginning may be a reflection of production. The ginning capacity is going down, and it needs to be lifted up if we are to continue the other side of the value chain of the cotton to go up to garmenting. In the construction subspace, we've seen so many cement factories opening up left and right in this country. My brother, Engineer Kivuka, will talk more about Kapeka Industrial Park. And you just need to go there and see trucks with all sorts of number plates lining up to pick tiles from that industrial park. That's when you will know that actually impact is visible. So here we may present numbers or statistics, but you need to visit these industrial parks for you to get a clear understanding that this is actually happening in the Ugandan economy. We've seen over the recent years, we've seen weak performance on the next slide of key strategic, the old teas, now one of them like tea industry has seen a collapse and exports reducing by about 17%. Dr. Mhums, I think, mentioned or talked about it, and I think Professor Suruma also talked about it. Our capacity in animal feed production, I don't know what explains this, has also gone down, despite the fact that we are increasing production in that space. Trends in the pharmaceuticals is growing, which is good at about 8%, but we've seen underperformance in other chemicals, the soaps and detergents and so on and so forth. So in line with this, or this could be a result of some of the things that we are actually seeing as interventions of government, the policy frameworks. My brother, Dr. Asman, was here, who leads in the production of the national development plans. I was privileged to work with the National Planning Authority, and I was privileged to have led the team that produced the Uganda Vision 2040. But in all these policy frameworks, there has been an emphasis on industrialization agenda. So the policy framework, I saw my brother Dennis here, who is responsible for the industrial policy in the Ministry of Trade. The Buy Uganda, Build Uganda. I saw my brother Dr. Mutambi, responsible for this policy in the Ministry of Trade, and local content policies, especially in oil and gas subsector. All these are good policy frameworks that support the industrialization agenda. The institutional support, I mentioned the revival of UDC, the establishment of UIA, and the different parks that UIA is doing, whether directly or together with the private sector like Kapeka, like the one in Mbale, or those they are doing directly like Namamve. Maybe you need to visit some of these places so that you can appreciate what is happening just in Namamve here in terms of industry establishments. Financing institutions like UDB and capitalizing them remains a critical agenda. And then having one-stop centers like at URSB, but they need also to strengthen the UNBS so that the standards framework is also in place and supportive. I've talked about Namamve Industrial Park as an effort of government to promote industrialization through infrastructure development. On the next slide. So there is Namamve, there is Mbale, there is Soroti Park, there is Kapeka, Bweyogerere, and many others are coming up, Kisoro, Kasese, Fort Potro, whatever. Nothing all comes right. There may be gaps here and there, but at least the effort and the direction is clear. The power expansion programs and effort to reduce the cost of power to manufacturing enterprises so that we can enhance their competitiveness remains critical, and you've heard the president talk about we must reduce power at 5 cents. We must reduce power at 5 cents. Road and logistics infrastructure, Most of the corridor roads have been improved, and Dr. Mhumza talked about that earlier on in the morning. There are so many incentives for local and foreign investment. I know we started with only foreign, but then later on brought on board the locals, the tax holidays, the duty waivers. All these are meant to attract us to go into that space and invest. The efforts on human capital and skills development for technical and vocational training, and then the efforts on markets like ESC, industrialization strategy. I was also privileged to be a member of the team that developed the East African Development Strategy 2015. Participation in the Free Continental Trade Area for Africa. How do we tap in this will be some of my recommendations at the end of it all. I will just highlight this slide on key manufacturing sector challenges because I don't want to discuss them. There is a whole session that is geared towards cost of doing business, and that is this afternoon. And this will be discussed in detail, and therefore don't ask me questions around this because all the questions will be answered tomorrow. But some that we have highlighted in our research work are capacity underutilization as a result of a market challenge, an import competition, in competition with imports, high input costs, and so on and so forth. There are cost drivers hindering competitiveness, like raw materials access. You've heard a lot of stories. You establish a factory, but there is no raw materials. Electricity, the high tariffs at 8 to 12 cents is extremely out of touch with the competition. Logistics. Here, Dr. Mhumza, we may need to also to disagree a little. You only need to use Ginger Road and know that as demand, all of you came here driving, no, not all of you, but most of you came here driving, and all of you passed a petrol station, and all those cars and all those trucks bringing fuel for you on the road is not sustainable. So as the economy grows, as you see you driving more and more cars, as you see consumption of these goods increasing, you just know that road is busy. If you want to know how busy it is, remember during COVID when we locked the gates. Trucks would create kilometers and kilometers, 5 to 10 kilometers of jam. That tells you that alternative modes of transport to quickly shift those goods to the market is very critical. But also as we grow our production capacity in the industries, we need to shift those goods to the market. So support of having railway systems and water transport in an integrated manner is extremely critical going forward. Policy and institutional gaps, strengthening trade facilitation is critical. Strengthening the standards infrastructure that I talked about, strengthening UNBS and others is critical. And then lack of tailored financing options is critical. And this is the exact that we have. Whereas benefits of liberalization are many, and we can see them as Dr. Mhumza highlighted earlier. The reality is, in some cases, they have failed to give us the reality we need. Cost of capital has failed to come down during liberalization. So intervention in that circumstance is inevitable. So, and therefore that brings me to the slide on the role of the state in the industrialization agenda. I agree with Dr. Muhumuza that the key foundation and reason of government is to provide supporting infrastructure to reduce the cost of doing business. That should be key. Basic economics tells you that markets allocate resources more efficiently. So support the private sector, have a private sector-led economy, because the private sector will allocate the resources better. However, in cases of where markets fail, the need for government intervention becomes extremely critical. Some of our fast-growing economies, Singapore has a UDC equivalent called Temeski. Malaysia has a UDC equivalent called Kazana. South Africa has a UDC equivalent called IDC. In Kenya here we have KDC, it's a new formation, but it was originally ICDC. Mauritius has the State Investment Corporation. It's a model you cannot deal away with, simply because markets do not always clear. So this public cooperation enables government to provide strategic direction. So if you tell commercial banks to lend to agriculture and there is no lending to agriculture, then you must lead the direction. The establishment or re-establishment of UDC is a clear testimony to this. In some cases, I was watching a video on social media of the late Mwalimu Julius Nyerere. And in that video, he says this globalization agenda is not a reality. He gives an example that the rules of boxing are the same, but you never get a heavyweight boxer and a flyweight boxer in the ring at the same time. So, globalization is okay. How do we get Uganda to go in the ring with Germany, with China, and be able to play? So there are instances, there may be inconvenient instances sometimes, but there are instances where subsidies are important. We hear subsidization is a distortion in the market. Yes, it is a distortion in the market. And that's the aim of distorting that market. But for you are not subsidizing your smallholder farmer and you expect that smallholder farmer to compete with the American farmer who is fully subsidized 80%. So it's not possible for us to continue lying ourselves that everything markets will clear. I've been warned of time. So as a result of that, UDC was re-established to play that role and fill up that particular gap. We do our mandate through establishing subsidiary and associated companies in the UDC Act Cap 208. All we do is clearly stipulated in there. We go for priority strategic sectors in agro manufacturing, in areas where we feel the private sector is not giving us the answer we want. You can imagine being in the road construction sector and paying 90% foreign firms to do your road construction. If there's one lesson we learned from COVID, is that lesson of self-sustenance. So if these companies are no longer to give you that service for any reason, then we are likely to lose the game or kneel down and plead. We do equity financing, lease financing, and shareholder loans where necessary. The objectives you can read from the Act. We've made some small contributions since we were re-established. So you'll go down until you see a picture of a factory of gloves. Sorry, I'm skipping now so that I can fit in Mildred's time. So we've intervened in Namamve here. Remember the president's statement that I read at the beginning, we shall produce these gloves. We are now producing these gloves in Namamve. So we are currently supplying about 70% of the NMS demand. Our target is to increase this to get 100% NMS, but also go to other JMS and the private sector. So this is import substitution. We have a total of 18 investments over these years. On the next slide, I've talked about road construction. We've also intervened in a local road construction company called Abeka to try and build local construction capacity. We are now happy we are doing currently Busunju Kiboga Hoima Road. We are also doing Matuga Semuto Kapeka Road, and we have signed contracts for Bubulovo Duda and Mbali and Kokonjero roads. We need to build our own local capacity to do this infrastructure. Of course, we would be happy if the Minister of Works could pay us all our outstanding dues, or else it's becoming hard to continue to work. We invested in Kalangala Infrastructure Services. We provide the ferry system between, if you go through Masaka, those ferry services you use, we have a 50% stake. I used to say we are the Umeme of Kalangala, but now I will say we are the UEDCL of Kalangala. And we are also the National Water of Kalangala through Kalangala Infrastructure Services. These are again interventions, and we've seen a lot of growth on that island as a result of these interventions. To have electricity, rich hotels are coming up, the beautiful beaches, and I can assure you on Friday it's very difficult to get space on that ferry to cross. Most recently, under pressure, we were given 1 year to work with the private sector to establish the Speak Resort Convention Center. That time, the target was to host NAM, which was hosted. But we need to continue marketing this infrastructure as a country, not to leave it to a company, so that we can have growth out of it. Today, it hosts most of our meetings. Seating capacity, main hall, 3,800 people. Overall rooms, 12,000 people. So we have capacity to host basically any kind of conference or convention in the world. The future of industrialization, I'd hoped to spend a bit of time here. We are seeing a lot of global disruptions coming in. There are shifts in power centers. Proper alignment is critical. We've seen power centers, US, Europe, BRICS, China, and those kind of things. We've seen disruptive trade barriers happening, tax incentives or disincentives from different countries. We've seen disruptions as a result of global AI investments. We are not investing enough in the technology that we should be. We've also seen disruptions as a result of climate change, the wars, the Russia, Ukraine, and so on. We must be alive to these because they have a direct impact on our logistics, how things move from here to the market, from there as our inputs, energy threats, we've seen cyber threats and so on. I always give an example that when Owen Falls Dam was constructed, if you were careful and when you're passing those bridges, you will see that there are army men who are armed and seated on the bridge. Today, attacking that bridge, you don't need to reach the bridge through attacks. So a lot of disruptions are happening, and these are greatly affecting our industry here. A case in point is the collapse in demand for tea, especially from the Asian countries and Sudan and Egypt. This has seen the tea industry collapse. It's a story for another day. So we need to do nearshoring. We need to identify our closest markets. How do I reach these close markets? The Kenya, the Tanzania, the Congo, the Sudan, and so on. We need to organize ourselves around those. We need to think about our 70% youth population who are youth, and adapting IT infrastructure that serves their needs, and so on and so forth. We need to do regional blocks. We need to reshape the way we do business, and this has been a core focus for the president since he came in. Today we have a 10-fold growth strategy. The president has guided that this country must grow by 10 times. And finance has picked up, the Minister of Finance has picked up this, together with the National Planning Authority, to increase the GDP 10-fold over the next 15 years. It's a tall order, but let's go for it. And throughout this process, the president highlights that's important. We do value addition. We add value to our commodities to be able to achieve the growth that is desired. On recommendations, as I end, one, I've talked about strengthening national value chains from production to final products, and that's the angle UDC has taken today, and I'm sure the private sector need to come. We work together on most of these value chains. We need to de-risk upstream activities and formalize outgrower systems to support a raw material problem. You get a community that comes here, convinces the president or the minister and say, we have a lot of cassava. Please come and establish a cassava factory. You go there in a season and you do your feasibility, the cassava is positive. You establish a factory, you look for the cassava, you don't see it. Now, as a business, you are not going to grow value chains. It becomes someone else's responsibility. So we need to work together and deliver as one, as government and the private sector. We need to provide additional infrastructure like cold storage, aggregation centers, and so on. We also believe that one of the best way to go about this is a market-led industrialization agenda. What does the free trade area demand? We produce for that market. How can we have an opportunity if people are suffering because Ukraine is not able to export wheat? How do we fill that gap? So that there is a market-led industrialization agenda and therefore value chain development. Address capacity underutilization by strengthening the demand side, that's the market side, and UDC together with NSSF, we are working together to establish a national marketing company to offtake some of this output, have capacity to store, but also have capacity to look for market out there and be able to sell. Strengthen infrastructure for industrial growth, deploying our little resources well. Hello. Okay, so we are back. Mildred, you didn't have to switch off the microphone. I'm about to finish. We need to strengthen infrastructure for industrial growth, strengthen institutional and policy coordination. I talked about delivering as one, and also with all our partners, create those good partnerships that would take us to the next level. We need to promote technology and innovation and support technology-intensive manufacturing, research and development, things we are not doing very well today. Today, if UDC invested in a project that is research-based, they will be asking you, when are you returning our money? Now, research-based investments will return money in a very long period of time. We need to understand this. We need to establish and capitalize the Industrial and Economic Development Fund. The UDC Act provides for two institutions. One is UDC as a corporation, but the other is the Industrial and Economic Development Fund. We are in discussion with the Ministry of Finance to have this established and capitalized. And here we need all sorts of partnerships, development partners, private sector, and so on. Public funding for innovation and youth-led enterprises is again very critical, but they need to be de-risked. The role that UDC does because of public sector patient capital. So UDC stands ready to serve as the anchor, investor, and strategic partner in sustaining this industrialization agenda and the Musevenomics program. Briefly, that is our sharing on this journey and how we have worked it up to today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Viraji. Please, it was not me. I think electricity, like you talked about it, it's electricity which was not being your friend. But I hope that we got better. The very last statement is the most important, I think, that we did also require. And as well, when you talked about the cost of capital, I love that much later on, you did mention the idea or aspect of patient capital. I love the coinage of the word patient in itself because it takes a little bit of time. If we are talking about industrialization, capital and investment is a very important aspect. So ladies and gentlemen, earlier we did miss out one of our sessions, which I would like us to wrap up through because we were trying to get to connect to the people who are joining us via internet because it's very important after COVID, we realized that the future that we were thinking about, being able to connect with people, not just physically, check. All right, I think I might as well just need to keep a backup here. In any case, we'll need a conversation with you, EDCL, after not too long from now. So ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite the session chair before I get to have our panel discussion. And I know that lunch is also very soon, so we might need to discuss whether we have lunch after the panel because we don't want to also make you fast unintentionally, because I know for our Muslim brothers and sisters, the most important thing that fast comes is near the intention to fast. So we don't want to make you fast without the intention itself. Allow me to invite the session chair for our opening ceremony, who is none other than Professor Augustus Nwagaba, the Deputy Governor, Bank of Uganda. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome our session chair who will be taking over the next few minutes, and I will let you know how we will be able to continue. I know we lost time, a few sessions to be able to catch up on, but I'm sure that we'll be able to deal with these ones. I very well know that the session chair is just having a word with the Vice Chairperson of the Uganda Development Forum in that capacity, and after the Elias, we will be able to have him here. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you very much, Mildred. I'm going to stand on the protocol that has been introduced before, and I will say, and I will go the Nigerian way and say all protocol observed. My name is Augustus Nwagaba, as I have already been told, and by grace of God, I'm the one serving as the Deputy Governor of the Bank of Uganda, which is responsible for ensuring that all these things are done. So we are very glad to be here this afternoon and for inviting us. Both of us, the Governor's office is very active. Dr. Michael Atingeko is also participating in this forum as well as myself. So we want to thank you very, very much. We also want to say that the Uganda Development Forum is very, very interested in ensuring that Musevenomics is kept to the mark and the Bank of Uganda is alive. The Bank of Uganda is alive to this process. And let me say that I want just to make a clarification of what was said in the morning. The Bank of Uganda is here. Just use 3 minutes and then invite our Minister for Constitutional Affairs, who is standing in for the Minister of Finance, my brother Matia, and then we shall go for our General Sare, who is going to explain better what this concept is about. This Musevenomics, ladies and gentlemen, is about what is it that has happened under the leadership of President Yoweri Museveni, because he has been in power uninterrupted for quite a significant amount of time, and therefore we believe that the policies the government of NRM has pursued must be studied and with evidence establish what exactly has been achieved, why has what was planned and not achieved, and how do you compare it with what we did before. But I want also to explain and clarify that for us in the central bank, some of us who may not know what the central bank is doing because of lack of time, I want to explain what we do when we are on our desks, exactly what we do. Our work can be divided into just two major tenets, and one of them is to maintain price stability, to ensure that all of you who are seated here, when you are doing your economic activity, you are sure you are going to complete that activity. If you are building a house, the bag of cement is 34,000 shillings, it is going to be 34,000 shillings, and you will complete your house in the period which you have planned. That is what you do. I think you need to clap for us, even if you didn't want. Especially those who have a nugu and you don't want to recognize what we are doing. That's what we do. And you must recognize that we have been able to control inflation. We have controlled the fundamentals, especially the fundamentals. Inflation was 161, to be very specific. In financial year 1986-87, inflation in Uganda was 161%. Inflation now is 3.9%. Our target is 5. We have been below that target, I think for the last 10 or so years. Number two, the existence of the Bank of Uganda and what it does is to maintain sound financial system. To maintain the soundness of the financial system, to ensure when you present your check, it is honored. When you make a payment to your sister in New York, our RTJ system, our SWIFT system works. And number three, what we have added, Professor Suruma, these days we don't have, for purposes of this audience, we, for example, don't have, that we are not using very much repos and reverse repos. We are now using, we have introduced many products, the swaps, interbank operations, forwards. We are going also to start, for purposes of those who are in the business, buying gold, and we are ready. We are absolutely ready for two purposes. One, to bring the people who are in these mines in Karamoja, in Kasanda, in Bulisa, in the formal sector, but also two, to maintain our reserves. To maintain our reserves. And I want to congratulate the people who are in the coffee sector, as Professor Suruma here has said, and Dr. Muhumuza, that our balance of payments are being really maintained by the coffee exports. Every morning we have a meeting, FMOS is still there, every morning at 9:30 to 10. The central bank has that meeting every day. And what is maintaining our balance of payments is really coffee receipts. We want to congratulate people in coffee, and we want to ensure that don't mind very much about the president wants value addition. The coffee value chain is 136 billion. The other year we earned 893. This year is 1.1 billion. It is still less than 1% of the entire coffee value chain. I think let's work on coffee exports. It is the one really maintaining our balance of payments, and for purposes of this August house balance of payments is an account, just as a financial account which calculates the amount of money we get abroad, total amount of all the money we earn abroad, as measured against the money we are spending. And the coffee receipts really the ones balancing that account. The number two is remittances. These girls who are working in Oman, in Jordan, and so on, they bring here $900 million. Doctors, engineers in Detroit, in London. I was there the other day with UN project, $700 million, total $1.6 billion, plus tourism 1.3. It's about 3.2, which is about 5.6% of GDP. So we want to agree with you, Professor, that we need to do something on coffee. Lastly, Dr. Muhumuza, on the issue of agricultural credit fund, we even have another one which was not talked about here, the Small Business Recovery Fund. This was the COVID fund, you remember. So these two were introduced by the central bank for demarketizing, for purposes of, because the interest rate is very high in commercial banks, as we've already been told, 20%, 18%, and yet our CBR currently is 9.75. We reduced by another 50 basis points from 9.8. Still, commercial banks have not responded effectively with the CBR. So what we have done, Dr. Muhumuza, is to ensure that we can have a facility that can really work for the, can we say, the vulnerable, or the people who cannot be able to compete effectively with the commercial banks. This is the Agricultural Credit Fund, and this money is available. Those of you who are in the agriculture sector, and it is not the central bank that is doing things in that area. The central bank, for purposes of people to understand, it is a bank which does not deal with the people. It's a bank which deals with the government and also commercial banks. It never deals with people directly. You deal directly with the commercial banks. So what we are doing, these are managed by commercial banks as it were. So we have SCF, we have Small Business Recovery Fund. These funds are available. We have a significant amount of money there. It is not absolutely much, but also it's not small. It is there, you can come. Money is never advertised. That's why it is scarce, and that's why it has value. We cannot advertise money. Money is got by people who know how to look for it. So you can find a way of looking for it, and you'll find it, and then you do the work which we are supposed to do. I think finally is that we have extended the mandate for price stability, maintaining sound financial system in support of socio-economic transformation. So the Bank of Uganda is directly interested in realizing this 10-fold growth. It is no longer there in the air that it is controlling commercial banks, it is a regulator. No, we are interested. Even today we have a function at the bank. I was in Bushenyi the other day. As a town hall, we have started the town hall meetings. Imagine the central bank somewhere in Bushenyi, in a village in Bitereko there. Have you ever seen that since 1966 when it was formed? When this central bank was established, since when has it talked to somebody in a village somewhere? But now we have realized that we need to be in the process of transforming the country. So the central bank is with the people. We have taken it to the people, and we are here as well. We are interested in this process very, very actively. And that's what I wanted people to know. I have my panelists this morning. We had the Minister of Finance, my brother Matia Kasaija. We have a very dangerous substitute there. My brother Mao. I don't know whether you are still chairman, Mao. We recognize you. Again, a very big round of applause, and you can come here. Honorable Norbert Mao is our Minister for Justice and Constitutional Affairs. You can come, Honorable Mao, and take your seat here. And what he's going to do is simple, he's our Vice Chairman also in Uganda Development Forum. So he will also explain what we are doing in Uganda Development Forum, and then he's going to invite our chairman, General Saleh, and then we shall be able to open this function officially. So I would require the media, therefore, to pay particular attention and also to focus effectively where you are supposed to focus, so that we can have a befitting opening ceremony of this conference. Thank you very much. Over to you, Honorable Mao. Before I finish, I don't want to come here again on this. These things which are being talked about, sorry, Honorable Mao, is that when the president asked these 6 questions, what was Uganda's economy prior to independence? What was Uganda's economy at the dawn, at the sunset of independence, under Idi Amin regime, under the second Obote regime, under President Museveni in 1986 to now? Then what would the Uganda's economy look like when it is a developed country? You had those questions. These are the questions that have been shaping Musevenomics. So what I did, I took advantage of, because I did my master's at the London School of Economics. I was at the London School of Economics yesterday. I've just arrived now in the morning. I was at the Vice Chancellor had invited me to address the entire global community which is there for the economics of the future. They invited me to talk about economics of the future. Now, in this book, chapter 2 of this book is particularly on this matter which we are addressing. I have tracked what President Museveni has done since 1986 to now, and also I've put outlook, including the oil economy, on what Uganda will look like. So the entire evidence of what has happened and what has not happened is here. And to pick one as I sit down is that, for example, foreign direct investment, people who are bringing money here, was negative in financial year 1985. It is because who would bring money in a conflict country. But now is 3.8 billion US dollars. Then you have income, you have revenue, and all sorts of things. So anybody who wants to understand Musevenomics and what has happened with the data, and of course numbers don't lie, the book is here. It is in chapter 2. And those who want to know the central bank, how the central bank operates, it is chapter 6 and chapter 13. Who want to know how the entire monetary policy operates globally, and of course using our central bank as a case study, everything is here. So Africans, you wipe out this issue of saying if you want to hide anything, you write it down. You disprove them that actually you can read. Honorable Mao. It's not free.
Thank you, panel chair and deputy governor of our central bank. All the distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and you are many, our international development partners, the intelligentsia who are bombarding us with these clashing ideas, and we, the ordinary people, like myself, and full figure, stand up in case you, the elites, you think this thing is only about you. The ghetto has stormed you. Dear friends, as vice chair of the UDF, my role is that of a morale booster. I want everybody to perform to the best of their capacities. A morale booster supports you 24/7. Whether you are winning, whether you are losing, they are there, wearing your colors proudly, the way we do with the Uganda cranes. Even when we are clobbered, we go back home singing. The chairman, General Caleb Akandwanaho, Salim Saleh, his role is that of like a music conductor. He doesn't have to play any instrument, but he knows good music. So he chooses, those of you who are here, you are the people who play the instruments very well in banking institutions, in private businesses, you are in industries, you are in academia, you are in the public service, you are on farms, you are all over the place. So what his role is like that of a magnifying glass to gather the scattered rays of the sun and focus it. And so I want in a special way to thank our very own Edward Katende. Where are you? Edward, come here and people see you. Edward performs a lot of slave labor in the UDF. And even though I am supposed to go for a delegates conference of the Democratic Party, I told Edward that I will come to introduce our chairman. Edward, thank you so much. Let's give Edward a round of applause. And the team that has worked with him, please stand up and we thank you. Thank you so much. Because of issues of the neck not turning very easily and us not having compound eyes, we have not seen you, but we acknowledge you. So, for very many years since he left the army, our chairman, General Caleb Akandwanaho, started with a kind of Juakali think tank. I called it Juakali because he started calling a few people and asking questions, teaching them what he knows and also learning from them. To the extent that now he can hold his own and have conversations with anybody. Doesn't matter who you are. Whether you are international diplomats, whether you are PhD scholars, whether you are political leaders like us, he has imbibed a lot of knowledge through this process of cross-fertilization that we call the UDF. Even us, the politicians, have been at the receiving end of some hard questions. He asked us the other day, what is your fundamental difference with President Museveni on the economy? Unfortunately, our media does not ask those kind of questions. Political leaders who want to lead this country come to your studios and you are on a side show. You are talking about skirmishes on the streets between security forces and political activists, and you don't ask somebody, what would you do differently? Now, I'll share with you a conversation that Ronald Reagan had with a little girl who he met, and he asked her, according to a video I saw, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the little girl says, I want to be president. And then he asked the little girl, what will be the first thing you do? And then the little girl says, there is a beggar on the street corner and I see that he's in great need. I want to give him money. I want to give him like $50. I think it can help him. So President Reagan tells the little girl, come and mow my lawn, slash my compound, and I'll give you the $50. Then you can give it to the beggar. And the little girl tells President Reagan, why doesn't the beggar go and slash your compound himself? And he earns that money. In other words, in this world, when you have earned your money, you really value it. And we need people to go to work. We want people to work, earn from their sweat. And anybody who has worked and earned money does not just want to part with it easily. And that's why people don't want governments on their backs. Now, General Saleh now has a fully fledged think tank around him. And there are many of you around here. Please stand up. The team of advisors I see my uncle General Idro there, the Honorable David Pulkol, and there are many others all over here. Now, connected to these people are the rest of you who I see debating very serious issues online. I've not yet had the courage to contribute because really the debate is high voltage. I'm a bit intimidated. Now, that is what this gathering is about. The purpose of the General's address is to identify the target, as you have said here. The last time we gathered, I advised people not to shoot with shotguns, because when you shoot with a shotgun, you injure many, but you kill none. So you injure many problems, but you solve none. You need to shoot with a rifle. And that is what the General is now interested in. And for that purpose, he has decided to camp in Gulu, my town. And targets have got to be realizable. You talked about Kennedy declaring that in our generation, America shall put a man on the moon. And they did. You also remember we once had a president here who also was fond of declaring targets. There was a time he said he was going to capture Golan Heights. He declared war on the apartheid regime in South Africa and organized jets to throw bombs in Lake Victoria as a rehearsal for capturing Cape Town. And during a dinner in London, not to be outdone by the Americans and their space endeavors, he announced that Uganda would now go to the sun in order to outdo America. And when he was asked by another dignitary at the table, how do you intend to do that, Your Excellency? Our beloved life president then said, we shall go there at night because the sun is very hot. Obviously, that attracted another heartfelt laughter bout. And then one commentator said, Your Excellency, you surely know how to blow your own trumpet. Again, not to be outdone, he stood up and said, No. I also play accordion. Obviously, he was not aware that blowing trumpets is a figure of speech. It has nothing to do with music. So, I'm glad the targets that we have here are said to be ideological. Our chairman has very strong beliefs. And in this world, we need believers, first and foremost. Because those who believe don't give up. That is what matters. One day, I had the courage to ask the president of Uganda a question. Mr. President, why do you keep going? Why don't you give up? He was amused by that question because it was in public. When he got up to speak, he said, Mao has asked me why I keep going. Then he said, I'm going to answer him. I keep going because I'm sure of where I want to go. I have no doubts. So we believe that all of us here are true believers in the future potential of Uganda. Whether we achieve everything we are talking about in our lifetime or not, our belief should be the common denominator bringing us together based on what is in our heart. Love for our country, love for our fellow human being. And that is why this gathering is not just about degrees. How many PhDs you have, how many masters, and so on and so on. It is about here, which takes me to Cuba. Che Guevara, who you all know, was fond of being absent-minded in meetings. And he was in one meeting, and El Comandante Fidel Castro was speaking On that day, on the agenda was to choose the chairman of the central bank, which we call a governor here. So Fidel Castro asked, do we have an economist in this meeting? And the absent-minded chair put up his hand. And then Fidel Castro rebuked him. Che, you are not an economist at all. And then Che said, sorry, El Comandante, I thought you had asked whether we have a communist in this meeting. And then Fidel Castro said, you have the job, because that's exactly what we need. We need first and foremost a communist who believes in our mission. The rest are details. Now that we have identified ourselves as true believers, now that we have identified ourselves as people who will not deceive each other, it is okay for IMF to deceive us, it is okay for the World Bank to deceive us, but it is more tragic when we deceive ourselves. And that's why I like the intense debate here. Talking about deception and self-deception, there's a lady here in this room, the Honorable Kabakumba. Where are you? The Honorable Kabakumba was a student in Sacred Heart. And apparently there was a young man in St. Joseph's College, Laibi, who admired her so much, but he had never spoken to her and had never met. It so happens that the Honorable Kabakumba was a topic of discussion in the boys' dormitory. So the question was, who would have the guts to talk to her? So one boy decided to write a letter in the name of Kabakumba. He wrote to himself and went and posted it, and then came to boast to his roommates that he had received a letter from Kabakumba. And for about a week, he was the most admired boy. Until another ambitious young man decided that this is too good to be true. So he went and stole the young man's exercise book, compared the handwriting with the alleged letter from Kabakumba, and found that they were exactly the same. So he was publicly humiliated. Now that is what self-deception is. You don't write to yourself a letter from a beautiful girl, because whether you believe it or not, it is untrue anyway. That's why not deceiving ourselves is very, very, very important. I welcome you on my own behalf, but you are going to receive a bigger welcome from our chairman. To the technical people, I put the question, is the general now online? He's supposed to speak to us online through connectivity. Please don't do to us what you did to Professor Muhumuza, or even worse. I understand Sarah Kajingo was one day giving a high-powered speech and was boasting about our success in the energy sector. We have these megawatts and so on, and then the power went off. I just wanted to say, Sarah, that's what they call punctuation. Your sentence got punctuated with a power outage. That's why we miss Umeme, because it was easier to curse. When power went off, you simply said, Umeme! But now, this thing, how do you go about it? It is very difficult. Even Professor Kamuntu has failed to say it. I think we need people who talk very fast. UDCL, something like that. So is the general online now? UBC? I need first to be assured that, okay, it is very important that you understand why I'm the one inviting the general, because the party I lead was in partnership with the National Resistance Movement, and and then divorced for 26 years. But during the time that we were working together, Uganda scored a lot. And that's why a country like ours should not waste human resources wherever it can be found. We must really collect human resources, and I wish to encourage our president to continue looking for capable people from wherever to come and work for Uganda. Because the economic miracle that we are celebrating, some of the foundations were built by the likes of Yoweri Chesimira, Ponciano Mulema, Robert Kitariko, Kafumbe Mukasa, Sevana Kizito, Zachary Olum. These were DPs. Unfortunately, they divorced after 10 years. And Norbert Mao has been quietly engaging, and we are now moving together again. Let's see whether we will also have miracles. Most probably the miracles will be in the field that I wish to quote, and I hope the General will comment on it. This is a quote. African countries can achieve economic stability and sustain rapid growth when they meet at least two interdependent conditions. They must establish a stable and secure political framework rooted in moral integrity, as well as unleash the entrepreneurialism of the populace, facilitated by a free and democratic society. Guess who? Professor Ezra Sabiti Suruma. 2014, Brookings Institution. Get the book wherever you may find it. It tells the story of that period of recovery of Uganda, laying the foundation. It's now my singular honor to invite General Caleb Akandwanaho Salim Saleh, Chief Coordinator of Operation Wealth Creation, but for this purpose, our own Chairman of Uganda Development Forum. General, you have the floor. Let's welcome General with a round of applause.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Mao. Thank you, everybody who is in attendance. I warmly welcome you to the fourth edition of Musevenomics. I was challenged to study this form of economics by people who had cooked me, by NPA, National Planning Authority had cooked me. Then they made a PowerPoint presentation for me to deliver to the president. And it was made out of PowerPoint. So I delivered the note to the president. He read it and he took his time. And in March 2020, he answered me. And he said that whoever wants to discuss with him the economy of Uganda and Africa in general should answer those questions. And as you know, he's both a leader and a teacher. He asks questions and then he answers them. So he asked the 6 questions which are under discussion there at the conference. And I hope you will critique what he termed as the stimuli package that him and his colleagues, like Chairman Mao has talked about, Mulema, Chesimira, and others, what they had come up with in the economic adjustment program. So I'm not going to focus on the stimuli packages they used to resurrect the economy. I'm going to focus on one factor of production. And I will be asking the technical team, because now these days I use experts to create debates on my behalf. Now that factor of production, when we were sent into the field as OWC, we found it to be the most distorted factor of production, and that was land. So today, I will use the words of experts to illustrate this point to the conference so that you can get answers for what these experts were raising. Now, slide number 1 is composed of an advisory note from Amanda Ngavirano, who is the chairperson of the Physical Planning Board. She's asking us, do we understand the land use balance sheet in Uganda? Because land is the factor of production. Now Amanda is asking us, do we really understand what we need to do with the land in order to be able to feed people by 2040, when we shall be 60 million people? That note is on the screen there. And I think you can discuss it as we go along. It is a short note, note, advisory note. Now, when I got that note, I had to consult the President's office. President's office, from a director there, Mr. Vincent, gave his own opinion of land use. And I think we need to go through them slowly so that we understand how do we distort, how do we remove the distortions from this major factor of production. Because all the stimuli packages that Musevenomics proposes, I think 80% of them or 60% of them are based on land. Now, if land is a distorted factor of production, then it distorts other areas. That's what we have been discussing now for almost 4 years. Then after that, I got a brief from the public agencies which are holding land, the land of Uganda, in trust. A note has also been attached, not that one, the one of conservation. No, not that one. Yeah, that land under conservation, mainly in northern Uganda, where they clearly state that 4 million acres of land are under conservation, either NFA, UWA, NEMA, Uganda Land Commission, through agencies of government. So that is slide number 4. Because I use experts, I don't have so much knowledge, but I use people who have knowledge to create discussion points for me. Then slide number 4 is an advisory note, actually for which I'm fundraising money for. Study who owns Kampala, who owns land in Kampala. It is that I have that advisory note from Professor John Chigula, and he's fundraising for money to make a concrete study so that we know who owns what land in Kampala, because it is becoming a big discussion point. Everybody thinks that I own half of Kampala when I have only, I think I have maximum 2 acres. And actually, if we were to ask the audience, how much land do you think KCCA owns? I don't know how many of them would get the right answer there. Then, interesting, the other week, I got a request from Internal Security Organization that they wanted to know how when I came to own Kapeka and what I'm using the Kapeka land for. Imagine you get a note from the internal security asking you, how did you come to own this land? It's there, but don't show the budget they had attached for research. Now, these are very, very important questions for all of us. So, fortunately for me, the day when ISO came, I had very, very good answers for them because we had already studied carefully the history, the ownership, the utilization of that land in Kapeka called Namunkekera Council Estate. So for today, for me, I want to stimulate debate within that conference. We know the stimuli which were used to resurrect the economy. We know them, security of persons and property, privatization and liberalization, return of Asian properties, and all those. But for me, I wanted to challenge the conference, the fourth or fifth edition of UDF discussions, to specifically focus on this factor of land as a factor of production, and we see how we shall remove the distortions from that factor so that we are able to utilize it maximally. Because when you read what Dr. Amanda talks about, she says there is shortage, so we must do something. Then Vincent says we must do something, but we shouldn't touch land for conservation. Then these agencies which are holding land in trust on behalf of government are not maximizing the usage. And sometimes they are the ones who create conflicts on those lands. And then this Kampala city, Kampala, who owns land in Kampala, is a very interesting subject, which I think really needs to be studied, needs to be funded and studied. Then I will ask Engineer Chibuka, who is present there. He is my specialist on the conflicting of lands, especially that one of Kapeka. If he is given time, he is going to give you insights. That is what I wanted to discuss, because even in northern Uganda right now, the issue is land, the conflict between the Achodis and the what they call Valaro, or what we call migrant cattle keepers, is about land. So the keynote address, I think, is going to be given by Dr. Suruma, who was my leader when I was at the Ministry of Finance. And I think he is going to articulate all the other issues related to our attempt to reach out to the moneyless people. In the last 10 years, I have led a mission called OWC. It has not been a very easy mission because we are told to go and look for people who have never touched money. 68%. We struggled with inputs, with coffee, with tea, with all those inputs over that period. And statistically, they say we were able to reduce the people outside the money economy from 68% to about 39%. And recently, I hear even the poverty levels have gone even lower. So, dear participants and discussants, I request that you focus on the stimuli packages that were used, but you also help us to understand the land use balance sheet. Because if we do that, I think we shall devise means on how to utilize maximally that resource. Because the land is where minerals are best, land is where homesteads are best, that's where factories are best. So if it remains as distorted as it is today, that will not help us to achieve the 500-fold, 50-fold or 500? 50-fold, 10-fold, 10-fold growth. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you help me to answer that question and listen carefully to the rest of the presenters, we shall produce a very big report out of this conference, and it will be helpful to us to look into the future. Because we have been discussing with the academia, with the private sector, with the ordinary mwananchi, and we are just trying to put together the economic history of Uganda, and it is very, very interesting. Because from what we have been able to read, the first development plan of Uganda as a protectorate was 1946. Now, 40 years later, in 1986, that is when NRM came to power, and they hired some experts under the IDRC, International Development Research Center from Canada. And as Chairman Mao said at that time, if you look at the list of cabinet ministers who were the first cabinet of our liberation, 60% 60% of them were from DP. So I have been arguing with Chairman Mao, what caused the divorce? Because the divorce happened when I was here in Gulu, 1996. But I think Chairman Mao is the one who causes that divorce, because that time he was really like fire. And I don't know whether he will agree with me. But now, 2022, we went back into an alliance with them, which was very, very good for me, because for me, I never liked the separation of those people whom we had worked with for 10 concrete years. And in those 10 years when we were working together, I think that's when Uganda was recording double-digit growth. But when we started fragmenting, that's when we got a lot of issues. So he's my vice chairperson in UDF in think tanking, and we are doing very good work. So I wish him the best in his delegates conference. And I want to thank the Minister of Finance. I want to thank the Uganda Development Corporation and all the agencies that have supported OWC to get to the ordinary mwananchi. We are very excited that we participated in this revolution of reducing the people who are outside the money economy, and we hope we can completely eliminate it in the next 5 to 10 years. Thank you very much for listening to me. I'm sorry I couldn't come to Kampala because Kampala is a bit troubled. So Gulu is more calmer than Kampala. That's why I stay in Gulu. It has a calmer atmosphere. And I invite all of you that the next conference that we are going to hold should be held in Gulu here. Thank you very much for listening to me. I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much, our chairman, General Kerebwakangwa, now retired, Salim Saleh, for those remarks. I think, as you have heard, the critical point he has raised is the real term we use is the constrained land market. And he's saying that the land market needs to therefore be freed. And this one, obviously, we know how the land market is constrained. And of course, land is a premier factor of production. So there is nothing that you can do without land. He has also brought out other factors, particularly production, but particularly the premier factor. In fact, other people call it the most primitive factor production, which is land, is so fundamental that we needed to do something about it. You remember the president has been wanting to do something about it. We did a very big study, I remember, with the people in Makerere, University of Nairobi, University of London, to do something on land. Let me repeat this. Let me say this as we conclude this session. There is no country in the world out of 192 countries. I've done a study for 126 of them, and I was using projective techniques. Projective techniques is a methodology you use backwards, see what happened with people who are not similar with you. But about what did they do that for you didn't do? So I did 126 countries, and those countries did two things, all of them. The first one is freeing the land market. They did something on land. Two, which Professor Suruma knows very well, is there is no country, get it from me, out of 192 which we have, including Monaco and Vatican, which have ever transformed its economy without having indigenous sources of capital, without pulling resources together. And among the reforms which took place, and this issue has not come up so far, is the issue of Uganda Commercial Bank. And I'm sure the president is going to bring it out tomorrow. The president will not leave this podium, I'm sure, without talking about it. There is no country, let me repeat it, where you will never make any step forward without having means of pulling resources yourself. In other words, there is no living on the savings of others. Let me address myself to ladies here. Never take a lift. You take a lift, you will tell me what will happen to you. These people who are in the government, and you, especially those who are working with us in these financial or economic sectors, there is no country which can ever live on the savings of others. That's why you are in debt. That's why you're in a cobweb. That's why Africa is in a cobweb framework of debt. Take responsibility of your actions. Pull your own resources. Let me speak it in Ruchigaru Nyankori as I sit down. As I sit down. My mother tells you, amazing Shabano, Tigozangaro. Egabo erakutambire amuhanda ojiho wawe. Those who come outside Kigezi, what I've said literally in the English language means that when you want to wash your hands clean, let me use the literal English language. When you want to wash your hands clean, you must have your own water. If you want to educate your children very well, you must have your own fees. This idea of you, the Africans, and especially Ugandans, producing children day and night and believing that we are going to pay fees for them, your brothers, did we take an agreement with you that your brother is going to pay fees for them? Have you taken an agreement with President Trump that he must look for your sick people? How can you really reason like that? That somebody, another person is going to look for your own sick people. What kind of naivety is that? We must thank President Trump. And me, I supported him even in the first elections. Because he's telling you, he's making you awaken that you must take responsibility of your own actions. How can you think that somebody can continue paying for your own medicine? For so many years, I don't know how many years. How can you think that you are going to continue borrowing, failing to do anything on your land, to do something about it, and you do business and do economic activity, and then the government gets taxes, and you are the ones who are crying that your salaries are very small? Where shall we get money to increase your salary when you are not doing any business where government is getting resources? So we want to thank people for coming, and I think this is the Mildred. This is the end of the session, and I want to thank my panelists. A very big round of applause to Honorable Mao. And obviously, Honorable Mao is one of the brightest. I think you can all agree. For us in Vichiga Nyankole, Turajango Ugamba Mazima. For us, the Wachiga, we are known for speaking the truth. Honorable Mao, you are really very bright. You're a very bright man. You're really very bright man. Those who want to accept, they accept. Those who don't want, shauri yako, you do your own activity. But Honorable Mao is a very bright man. That one is for sure. It's for sure. And once you are running a government, it is very important to. That's why these governments have, like Singapore, Malaysia, South Korea, and General Park Chung-hee, even with her daughter Park Geun-hye, Honorable Badewa in Malaysia, Lee Kuan Yew. His other name is Harry Lee Kuan Yew. Use the bright people, and you see where their countries are. They didn't mind very much about the political party. You look at Mauritius, between the Mauritius militant movement and the Mauritius Labour Party, all coming together to develop Mauritius together. And it is I think we better start looking at what we can do rather than the color of the person, the religion of the person you are seated with. You want to put the other person is in which religion. This is what kind of trivialities. Please move away from trivialities. Love your country. Love this Uganda. I told people in London yesterday, I told you that nobody, I was speaking to Ugandans as well, most of them. I told them nobody is going to love Uganda on your behalf. Nobody is going to love your family on your behalf. If you think that anybody is going to love Uganda on your behalf, you are really being naive of the highest class. So thank you very much, my sister Miri, to come and take over. Thank you.
A bigger round of applause to our session chair, Professor Augustus. Thank you so much. And I think you, when you started speaking the home language, you became brutally honest because people from that side will say it as it is. You like it or not, it is an open one. And I think when General Saleh said people say he owns most of Kampala, when I was growing up seeing land for sale, do you know how to read the name? The last one? The S-A-L-E, it becomes land for Saleh. So most probably that is why most people think the land here it does belong to him. So probably he needs to start from that angle right there. Ladies and gentlemen, we did also, Professor Augustus forgot to probably remind you, his copy, a book about transformative economics that is written by himself. You can be able to access it at only 20,000 shillings right behind when you're going for lunch. I know that we've been seated for long, and I don't want to stand in between lunch. Oh, I beg your pardon, not 20,000, 85,000 shillings. I am sorry. I am not going to pay the balance, so please, it is 85,000 shillings, not 20. So whoever told me 20, you misled me. So ladies and gentlemen, we are going to have our lunch exactly at the same point where we had breakfast. And then when we come back, we're going to do a marathon of 2 panels because we've missed one panel that had to be in the morning session, which is chaired by Honorable Victoria. So we're going to have just one presentation in the afternoon and 2 panel discussions. And that is where we're also going to combine the plenary session. So I please do request that do not run away. This is not a pass for you to run away. Except maybe for Honorable Mao, who is going for the delegates conference pretty soon. We might give him time to be able to travel. But we're going to have our ushers lead us, just the same way they did lead us earlier on, provide us the coupons as we go for lunch. And we will have lunch. I hope that we can be able to have it in about maybe 40 minutes so that we are able to get back early and have the 2 sessions. We don't want to have anything spill over into the next day tomorrow because tomorrow is also very, very busy. So ladies and gentlemen, we'll go for lunch right now. And when we come back, we'll have the 2 panels and just one more presentation, which will be on the cost drivers in Uganda's business environment. So it's going to be a power-packed afternoon, but also it's going to be a very engaging one in the afternoon. So let's continue with mingling and speaking to each other. as we go for lunch. Let's continue with the networking as well. I'll request the DJ to give us some music as we get our ushers to lead our guests in for lunch.
Uganda Development Forum is organizing a 2-day Musevenomics conference